Good day, class. We'll now begin our discussion of Chapter 10, topic of motivation and emotion. These notes are from a previous version of the textbook, and they are available on your Canvas site. So by way of overview, we have motivation and emotion. Motivation will be examining the theories of motivation, drives, arousal, hierarchy of motives, and some motivations that we'll look at in depth: hunger, belonging, and achievement. Then we'll examine emotion, the roles of arousal, behavior, and cognition. We'll examine embodied emotion, what's going on in the body during emotions, expressed and experienced emotion, and the influence of culture and gender. Topics you might be driven to learn about: models of motivation, instincts in evolutionary psychology, drives and incentives, seeking optimal arousal levels, and a hierarchy of motives. Motivation: a need or desire that energizes behavior and directs it towards a goal. So we have the energy to do something, and it is directed toward a specific something, a goal. For example, Aaron Ralston found the motivation to cut off his own arm when he was trapped on a cliff in Utah in 2003. Well, the question would be this: what motivated him to do this? Hunger? The drive to survive? The drive to reproduce? The drive to survive might seem more obvious, but see, the idea is that there could be other things and other reasons why people may want to try to survive. After thinking for a while, he had no way to survive. He had a dream of a one-armed man picking up a young boy. Maybe this stirred up his desire to live, to be a father someday. It could have motivated him even further to take the drastic action that he did. Here are a few perspectives on motivation. There are different ways of thinking of the way motivation works, all of which relate to the push of biological processes and the pull of culture, social forces, and ideals. We have instinct theory, which is based on the evolutionary perspective, which later sort of overtook instinct theory. We have drive reduction theory, arousal or optimization theory, and then the hierarchy of needs or hierarchy of motives. So, do instincts direct human behavior? An instinct is a fixed, rigid, and predictable pattern of behavior that is not acquired by learning and is likely to be rooted in genes in the body. Humans may have a general nesting instinct, but the specific behavior is less predictable. The bird can only build one kind of nest, but humans may decorate a baby's room in a variety of ways or use general instinct to simply buy and repair a home. So the idea here is this: humans don't have, quote, nesting, unquote, behavior. There are certain things that we do, most likely based in some extent on the social clock that we discussed previously, meaning that you graduate from college, you get a job, you meet someone and fall in love, you marry, you have this career for some time, you've been married for some time, you say, hey, it's time to start a family, buy a house, fix the house up, and do all those types of things. But when it comes to the bird, they are compelled to do certain things, compelled to build a nest a certain way. It is part of their instinctual programming, so to speak. So, other species have genetically programmed instincts motivating their actions. Well, do humans? Human babies show certain reflexes, but in general, our behavior is less prescribed by genetics than other animals. We may, however, have general patterns of behavior which can be explained as emerging through natural selection, for example. Instinct theory has given way to evolutionary theory and explain much of the human behavior. Drive reduction. A drive is an aroused or tense state related to a physical need such as hunger or thirst. Drive reduction theory refers to the idea that humans are motivated to reduce these drives, such as eating to reduce the feeling of hunger or drinking to reduce the feeling of thirst. This restores what is referred to as a homeostasis, a steady internal state within the organism. So what we see is this: need, food or water. We have a need for food in the body, or a need for water in the body, and then that causes a drive to occur. A drive, which again is this aroused, tense state of hunger or thirst, which then produces drive reducing behaviors, finding food to eat or liquids to drink in order to reduce the drive that one is experiencing. Seeking optimal arousal. Some behavior seems driven by a need to either increase or decrease our physiological arousal level. Curiosity, as with kids and these monkeys, may seek stimulation to reach an optimal level of arousal. One of the worst things that can happen when you're babysitting a bunch of young kids is that they are bored. When they become bored, then they have to start doing things in order to raise their optimal level of arousal, to get their arousal level up. This is one of the reasons why monkeys, as well as kids, are very curious creatures. They have a hunger for stimulation, a hunger for novelty. And we call this, for humans, this makes us infovores, seekers of knowledge. So it seems that curiosity can be considered a basic need or drive to get to know one's environment to improve the chances of survival. So in this model, curiosity is seen as a way of seeking the optimal arousal level. They're always asking questions. People with ADHD seem to seek stimulation for this reason. It increases dopamine levels almost as well as Ritalin does, the drug that is prescribed most often for that particular condition. Although the pursuit of such stimulation, even by fidgeting, can be disruptive. It is not clear that curiosity of scientists, though, serves to increase the physiological arousal. Performance and arousal levels. What happens when we succeed at raising our arousal levels? The Yerkes-Dodson law. Arousal levels can help performance, but too much arousal can interfere with performance. For taking an exam, moderate arousal might be best. Below, we see the effect of arousal on performance depends on how comfortable we are with the task. You can see with difficult tasks, we perform better when arousal level is low. For easy tasks, we want to have a little bit more arousal around to perform easy tasks. If you look at these things combined, so generally speaking, a moderate level of arousal may be a place where we see the performance at its highest. Then we have the hierarchy of needs and motives. Abraham Maslow proposed that humans strive to ensure that basic needs are satisfied. Then they find motivation to pursue goals that are higher on this hierarchy. So let's look at this hierarchy of needs here. At the bottom, we have physiological needs, the need to satisfy hunger and thirst. Then safety needs, the need to feel the world is organized and predictable and need to feel safe. Then we have belongingness and love needs, the need to love and be loved, to belong and be accepted, the need to avoid loneliness in separation, and so on and so forth. So the basic premise is this. Before we can worry about safety needs, our physiological needs need to be met first. Before we can worry about belongingness or love needs, our safety needs need to be met first. For example, if we are police officers and we're in a shootout and one officer is being shot at and they're dodging bullets, it is very unlikely that they're worried about or thinking about asking Susie out on a date, because at that moment the most pertinent need is going to be their safety needs. And only when safety needs are met will they start worrying about belongingness and love needs, asking Susie out on a date. After belongingness and love needs, we have esteem needs, the need for self-esteem and achievement, competence, and independence. Then we have self-actualization needs, the need to live up to one's fullest and unique potential, to be the best version of you can be. And then self-transcendence needs, the need to find meaning and identity beyond the self. There's something more important than you physically as a self, as a person. So there are going to be times in which we violate Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do hunger strikers and mystics feel secure enough in meeting their needs that they can do without food temporarily to pursue a higher goal? Soldiers sacrifice safety, but could they be seen as fighting for safety both indirectly protecting the country and directly defeating the people who are shooting at them? So we do see that there are at times going to be violations of these hierarchy of needs. Going back to the previous slide, we see here at the very top self-transcendence needs. The need to find meaning and identity beyond the self. With self-transcendence need, it almost suggests that one can find something more important than their physical safety, thus violating the needs that's laid out here by Maslow. So, topics you might be hungry to learn about. Hunger, body chemistry and brain control of hunger, cultural and situational effects on hunger, obesity and weight control challenges, physiology, social factors, and food and activity factors. Hunger. Research on hunger is consistent with Abraham Maslow's hierarchy. In one study, men whose food intake had been cut in half became obsessed with food. Hunger even changes our motivations as we plan for the future. The physiology of hunger. Experiments and other investigations show a complex relationship among the stomach, hormones, and different parts of the brain. Feeling hungry can include stomach contractions. The feeling can happen even if the stomach has been removed or filled with a balloon. The notion is there are going to be many ways in which we are going to have this sense of hunger. Stomach contractions have been related to hunger pains that we experience as well. The hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, again, is something that we've discussed before, a part of the brain. Receptors in the digestive system monitor levels of glucose and send signals to the hypothalamus in the brain. The hypothalamus then can send out appetite stimulating hormones to tell the body it's time to eat. The hypothalamus sends appetite stimulating hormones, and later, after eating, sends appetite suppressing hormones as well. These hormones travel from various organs of the body back to the brain to convey messages that increase or decrease appetite. Some of the hormones that increase the appetite are ghrelin, orexin. Some that decrease appetite, insulin, leptin, and PYY. So all of these hormones have some influence on what we'll be doing by way of eating, by way of our sense or feelings of hunger. Regulating weight. When a person's weight drops or increases, The body responds by adjusting hunger and energy use to bring the weight back to its initial stable amount. Most mammals, without consciously regulating, have a stable weight to which they keep returning. This is also known as their set point. So, in a way, we have a weight thermostat that has a certain setting that we don't have much to say about. A person's set point might rise with age or change with economic or cultural conditions. Therefore, this set point of stable weight is more of a current but temporary settling point. We'll see more on that a little bit later. We also have which foods to eat, or our taste preferences. Some taste preferences are universal. Carbohydrates temporarily raise levels of serotonin, reducing stress and depression. Other tastes are acquired and become favorites through exposure, culture, and conditioning. Different cultures encourage different tastes. Some cultures find these foods to be delicious: reindeer fat and berries or roasted guinea pig. We also have biology, evolution, and taste preferences as well. Differences in taste preferences are not arbitrary. Personal and cultural experience influenced by biology play a role as well. We can acquire a food aversion after just one incident of getting sick after tasting food. It is adaptive in warm climates to develop a taste for salt and spice, which preserve food. Research has found that nations that are very hot, have very hot climates, they tend to spice their meats with many spices. For example, I believe India had on average 10 spices to spice food. They have a very hot climate in India. However, Finland, which has a much cooler climate, on average will have only 2 spices to spice food. The idea is that the spices probably help control bacteria because of the conditions or climate conditions in the hotter climates. So disliking new tastes, neophobia, may have helped to protect our ancestors as well. So by having some food that is you're unfamiliar with, you would probably try to avoid it. Disliking new tastes helped protect our ancestors from trying to consume something that their bodies may not be used to. So the idea here, even with young kids, the first time they taste something that may be somewhat different to their previous experiences, they may not like it. So it may indicate that you may want to try several occasions for them to get used to it. How much do we eat? Eating depends in part on situational influences. Social facilitation, which we'll see a little bit more in the next chapter. Social facilitation is the presence of others accentuates our typical eating behaviors or eating habits. Unit bias. We may eat only one serving or unit or scoop, plateful or bunful of food, but we'll eat more if the serving size is larger. So let's look at these real quickly. What social facilitation is basically saying this: whatever your tendency is, if you tend to eat a little less than the average person, when you're around others, you'll eat even less. If you tend to eat a little bit more than the average person, when you're around others, you'll eat even more. So it simply accentuates our eating habits. The unit bias. We may eat only one serving or unit, but if the serving size is larger, we eat more. So this has another implication of supersizing a particular fast food meal. Then we have the buffet effect. We eat more if more options are available. So when you go to a buffet, you will tend to eat more food. It's just the way things are. So the buffet effect really is not an official term, it just describes what goes on here. So in evolutionary terms, so the idea here is this. Our ancestors stored fat and nutrients during bountiful times when food were quite plentiful, when more variety was available. So humans were prepared for possible winter famines in early fall when more kinds of plants were bearing fruit and animals were storing fat. So we may have a tendency when there's more food available in a buffet, for example, we'll eat more, storing potential fat up for when we're going to have some tough times ahead. So let's look at the influences on eating behavior that we've covered so far. Biological influences. We have the hypothalamus and the creation or suppression of appetites, appetite hormones, stomach pains, weight set or settling point, attraction to certain types of foods like sweet and salty taste, and adaptive awareness toward novel food. We have the psychological influences as well, sight and smell of the food, variety of foods available, and so on. And then the social cultural factors as well, culturally learned taste preferences and responses to cultural preferences for appearance and so on. All these factors, the biopsychosocial factors, play a role in our eating behavior. Do we need to control our hunger? When we eat enough to noticeably gain weight, we can face discrimination, bullying, and even depression. Standards for body size and vary from different cultures, sometimes creating an unhealthy norm of being overweight or underweight. Body fat has been seen as a sign of affluence and thus has been considered attractive. But at a certain ratio of weight to height, health risks do arise. The physiology of obesity. Having some body fat is normal and healthy. Fat stores energy. That's why we have it. Being mildly overweight is not necessarily a problem if the person is in good physical condition or exercising. Obesity can lead to health problems including diabetes, heart disease, cognitive decline, and some cancers. The physiology of obesity can also make it hard to lose weight due to the set point, metabolism, and genetics, appetite, and lifestyle factors. Obesity and losing weight is not just an issue of motivation, however. Set point and metabolism. For a variety of reasons, a person's set point, the stable weight the body keeps returning to, drifts from a healthy weight. Those who become overweight develop a new set point that is now hard to shift. Why? Once the set point has shifted, metabolism shifts to maintain it. The resting metabolism slows down. So as you have gained weight, for example, and the set point has been shifted, the metabolism will shift as well, making it more difficult for you to change that weight or to lose that weight. Starving to lose weight slows metabolism even further. So the types of things that you may want to do to try to lose the weight may combat you at times. So anything that slows the metabolism is going to make it more difficult for you to lose the weight. Hunger kicks in when weight goes below the new set point. So the new set point that has been established, then hunger will kick in. So as you lose weight and you're losing weight, goes below the set point, you will become more hungry. Because the body works this way, it is thus easier to stay lean than become lean. So what it comes down to is this. You have an established set point. You go on a diet. You get beneath the weight of the set point. Then what will happen is your body will make you more hungry, and your body will even slow down the metabolism further, therefore trying to get you to get that weight back. The same thing happens too if you're trying to gain weight. If you go over the set point, then what will happen is the metabolism will speed up, getting rid of that extra weight, and you'll be less hungry. So you almost have to force yourself to eat in order to try to maintain that weight. So the set point is fighting your dieting behaviors. The genetics of obesity. Adopted siblings eating the same meals end up with a BMI, body mass index weight, resembling their biological parents, not the people in the same household, suggesting genetic influence. Identical twins have similar weights even when raised apart with different food. There seems to be many genes with effects on weight. Lifestyle factors in obesity. People who are restless and fidgety burn off more calories and gain less weight than others. Inadequate sleep causes weight gain, despite increased activity time because of appetite hormones. Having an obese friend correlates with becoming obese. A sedentary lifestyle, sitting around on the couch all day, and fast food may be leading to increased body fat worldwide. The prevalence of obesity, rates of being overweight. This is somewhat old data, but what we can see is predicted in 2020, the United States is leading the charge here. This is the proportion of overweight individuals. BMI, or body mass index, greater than 30 is obese. 1 billion people worldwide are overweight, 300 million of which are obese with a BMI of greater than 30. Obesity and weight control. How does obesity develop and why is it hard to change? It was adaptive for our ancestors to crave energy-rich food when available. The idea is that we weren't sure when the food would no longer be available, so we wanted to make sure that we ate when we could. All right? The problem, this energy-rich junk food is now easily available and cheaper than healthier food. It is adaptive to slow down our burning of fat when food is scarce. So our bodies are designed for famines, to have the fat cells available to us for when food becomes really scarce, so we can utilize those fat cells in order to survive. So we have the easy availability of rich fat food. We have the adaptive process of having slowed down our burning of fat when food is scarce. The problem is following. In poverty or in crash diets, our body can slow down weight loss. So our metabolism is sort of fighting against us. So we have the easy access to all this rich food that is cheaper for us. And we also have our metabolism, which are designed to maintain those fat cells for when we have a famine, but we don't have a famine. Therefore, we have all these fat cells and they just sit around doing nothing for us because we do not have that famine. Now, in the past, eons ago, it was very beneficial to us humans. So when there was a famine, when all the animals went away or there was a drought and we didn't have vegetation or other food around, the only ones that were able to survive would be the people who had the fat cells because they had energy that they could utilize in order to survive. And the people who did not have those fat cells, well, they died off. Losing weight, the challenge. Because of the physiological factors and perhaps due to lifestyle and peer issues, once obese, weight loss is difficult, and permanent weight loss is even harder. Obsessive weight loss attempts can add to shame, anxiety, depression, and disordered eating habits. Losing weight, the plan. If you decide to move your body set point to a lower body weight, begin with an understanding of the metabolic changes you face so that you blame slow progress on physiology and not poor willpower. Begin with self-acceptance and the decision to change rather than feeling shame. Make gradual and consistent, not drastic and varying lifestyle changes. Increase exercise and healthy food choices. And of course, get support. Now, let's look at another key motivation. Hunger is a key motivation that we must have. But there's another motivation too. A motivation to belong. What do people need beside food and sex? Social life, according to Aristotle. Community, according to Alfred Adler. In Middle English, to be wretched, reka, means to be without kin nearby. Roy Baumeister, Mark Leary, and Abraham Maslow say we need to belong. Belonging, being connected to others, part of a group or family or community. Why do we have a need to belong? Evolutionary psychology perspective. Seeking bonds with others aids survival in many ways. Keeping children close to caregivers. Mutual protection in a group. Cooperation in hunting and sharing food. Division of labor to allow growing food. And emotional support to get through crises. Balancing bonding with other needs. The need to bond with others is so strong that we can feel lost without close relationships. However, we also seem to need autonomy and a sense of personal competence or efficacy. There a tension between me and us, but these goals can work together. Belonging builds self-esteem and prepares us for a confident autonomy. So, the need to belong leads to loyalty to friends, teams, groups, and families. However, the need to belong also leads to changing our appearance to win acceptance, staying in abusive relationships, joining gangs or nationalist groups, and violent organizations. Disrupted bonds, new beginnings. Children repeatedly moved away from primary caretakers in childhood may have difficulty forming deep attachments in adulthood. And we've seen previously in a previous lecture a discussion about secure attachments versus insecure attachments and how our attachment styles when we were young can have an influence on our attachment styles as adults. People losing a loved one or moving away from a hometown can feel grief. Being ostracized, cut off from social contact, or excluded can lead to real physical pain. And yet, people can find resilience and relief from pain by building social connections. The key point here is this: we are so powerfully motivated to belong and to need others, is that it also can serve as a great source of pain for us. So we have others in our life, but when those others cut us off, ostracize, we become isolated, it can cause pain, even physical pain in us as well. Social networking and social connection. Is our online self-disclosure honest and healthy? Is social networking making us more connected or less? Do updates and tweets build connection? Use of social networking can become a compulsion, sacrificing face-to-face interaction and in-depth conversation. Research shows a portrayal of one's self online is often close to one's actual sense of self. Research also shows online social networking is associated with the following: narcissism or self-centeredness, less connection to neighbors, and more connection to people who share our narrow interest and viewpoints. During this time of pandemic and self-isolation, it can even be more of a powerful type of thing. So obviously, those other external factors can play a role in our social connection. Motivation to excel in work. What is our motivation to do well in jobs? Is it just the desire for belonging and gaining income to meet basic needs? Humans in many cultures seem to have an achievement motivation, a desire for accomplishment of goals, mastery of skills, meeting of standards, control of resources. What helps us satisfy our achievement motivation? Discipline, sticking to a task despite distractions. The 10-year rule, having enough experience to develop expertise in a field. Grit, passionate persistence at a goal. And hardiness, resilience under stress. Now, let's talk about emotion. We'll look at physiological arousal. Comes before emotion, comes with emotion, becomes an emotion when cognitive appraisal or labeling is added. Emotions in the brain. Sometimes cognition is bypassed in emotional reactions. Emotions in the body. The autonomic nervous system. Emotions with different brain and body response patterns. So we'll be covering these topics. Emotion, arousal, behavior, and cognition. Someone cuts you off on the road. You may feel the emotion of anger. Emotions are a mix of expressive behavior, yelling or accelerating, bodily arousal, sweat, pounding heart, and conscious experience. Thoughts, especially the labeling of the emotion. What a bad driver. I am angry, even scared. Better calm down. So it's going to be your expressive behavior, what you are doing, your bodily arousal, your physiological reactions to this event, and what you think consciously about it. These are all part of your emotion. So how do these components of emotion interact and relate to each other? Do our thoughts trigger our emotions, or are they a product of our emotions? How are the bodily signs triggered? How do we decide which emotion we are feeling? An emotion is a full body, mind, behavior response to a situation. Theories of emotion. The arousal and cognition chicken and egg debates. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or did they evolve together? Which happens first? The body changes that go with an emotion, or the thoughts, the conscious awareness and labeling of the emotion, or do they happen together? James Lange theory. Two individuals, James and Lange. Body before thoughts, meaning that we have physiological changes that occur before we have the thoughts of what emotions we may be experiencing. Cannon-Barr theory, the body with thoughts, that the physiological changes happen along with the thoughts simultaneously. Singer and Schachter two-factor theory, the body plus the thoughts and the labeling of what that means to us personally. And then we have Jean-Jacques Ledoux-Lazarus, the body-brain without conscious thoughts. So let's look at James Lange theory, body before thoughts. William James, we feel afraid because we tremble, sorry because we cry. So he's describing the physiological changes before we have the emotional indicators here, the emotion that we experience. So the James Lange theory states that emotion is our conscious awareness of our physiological responses to stimuli. Our body arousal happens first, and then the cognitive awareness and label of the feeling, I am angry. According to this theory, if something makes us smile, we may then feel happy. Then we have Cannon-Bard theory, simultaneous body response and cognitive experience. The Cannon-Bard theory asserts that we have a conscious cognitive experience of an emotion at the same time as our body is responding, not afterwards. The human body responds or have responses run parallel to the cognitive responses rather than causing them. So, adjusting the Cannon-Bard theory. Emotions are not just a separate mental experience. When our body responses are blocked, emotions do not feel as intense. So if something prevents us from feeling the full brunt of our emotionality, okay, emotions are our body responses, then the intensity of the emotions are going to be lessened. So when our body responses are blocked, emotions do not feel as intense. Our cognitions influence our emotions in many ways as well, including our interpretations of stimuli. Is that a threat? Then I'm afraid. So when we have these other additional cognitions, they will influence our feelings as well. Then we have Schachter-Singer two-factor theory. Suggests that emotions do not exist until we add a label to whatever body sensations we are feeling. I face a stranger and my heart is pounding. Is it fear, excitement, anger, lust, or did I have too much caffeine? The label completes the emotion. So in a study by Stanley Schachter and Jerome Singer in 1962, subjects experienced a spillover effect when arousal was caused by injections of what turned out to be adrenaline. The subjects interpreted their agitation to whatever emotion of the others in the room appeared to be feeling. The emotional labels spilled over from others. For example, they were given something, they didn't know how it would affect them. They're in a room with people who are happy, and they're asked what their emotion is, their personal emotion. They fill it out on a form, for example. They feel that they are happy if other people are happy. They feel they're angry if other people are angry. That is the basic premise here. We have a spillover effect. We don't know what it is, and we only experience it once we label it, and we pick up from what it is based on cues from our environment. So, what about emotions without our awareness or cognition? Some emotional reactions, especially fears, likes, and dislikes, develop in a low road through the brain, skipping conscious thought. Again, we talked about this previously, where we talked about the conscious versus unconscious processing of information. So let's look at what we have here. We note that we have this top-down cognitive function such as threat appraisal can be involved, but these emotional responses can still operate without conscious thought. So in one study, people showed an amygdala response to certain images above and left without being aware of the image or their reaction to it. So what this is basically saying is that at some level, at an unconscious level, our body may be experiencing fear. We are just not aware of it. So the speedy low road, the fear stimulus happens, but we're not consciously aware of it. The thinking high road, well, we may have this fear response, but then when we process it, then we have conscious awareness of it. You could be, for example, walking on a path in the woods somewhere, and then all of a sudden your body becomes agitated and you jump off the path. It could be that you, at some unconscious level, became aware of something that was dangerous. The low road knew the issue, and then you responded appropriately. And as you're in the air moving away from that path in the woods, your brain catches up. You're sort of receiving an after action report that there was a snake you're about ready to step on. And therefore it becomes clear as to why you behaved the way that you did. So when appraisal affects emotion, so we have Schachter and Singer highlighted the role of appraisal in labeling emotion. This is agitation, is fear. You label it. Richard Lazarus noted that the top-down cognitive appraisal of stimuli, is this a threat or something I would enjoy, influences our emotion. So here are the summary of the theories of emotions that we've addressed so far. James Lang, our awareness of our specific bodily responses to emotional arousal stimuli. Example, we observe our heart racing after a threat and then feel afraid. Cannon Bard, bodily response plus simultaneous subjective experience. Example, our heart races as we experience fear. Schachter and Singer, two factors, general arousal plus conscious cognitive label. Example, arousal could be labeled as fear or excitement depending on context. Zanjok and Ledoux, instant before cognitive appraisal. We automatically react to a sound in a forest before appraising it. We respond in somehow before we appraise it. And Lazarus, appraisal, sometimes without our awareness, defines emotions. We hear something scratching on the wall or the wall outside our bedroom window or something, then we say, it's just the wind. We've appraised it. And we've identified it as not being dangerous. So looking at these theories of emotions, we have the same stimuli here for everyone. We have the sight of oncoming car, perception of the stimulus. According to James Lang theory, pounding heart, then we have the fear emotion. Physiological issues are going to be first. But Cannon Bard, we have the pounding heart, the physiological issue there. Then we have the fear at the same time. They happen simultaneously. In Schachter and Singer, we have the pounding heart, and then we label it cognitively, I am afraid, and then we have the experience of the emotion of fear. And let's say we avoided the highway today without even identifying or explaining any fear. Well, that is the low road of emotion. So we're not even aware of why we avoided the highway today, because it was something that we may not be consciously aware of, but it had some impact on our behavior there. Is experienced emotion as universal as expressed emotion? Carol Izard suggested that there are 10 basic emotions, those evident at birth seen here, plus contempt, shame, and guilt. So we have joy, then we have anger, and we have interest. We have disgust, then surprise, then sadness, and then fear. I have no idea what they did to the young person in fear, but it's kind of scary. All right, so we see each of these being expressed, and they seem to be the same type of expressions universally, meaning on the globe, on our planet. So this also suggests to some extent that these are things that most likely we are born with, these basic expressed emotional responses: joy, anger, interest, disgust, surprise, sadness, and fear. Now we have embodied emotion, the role of the autonomic nervous system. This takes us back to a previous chapter as well. The physiological arousal felt during various emotions is orchestrated by the sympathetic nervous system, which triggers activity and changes in various organs. Later, the parasympathetic division calms the body down. So the sympathetic system dilates the pupils, decreases certain types of things like salivation, makes us sweat, and so on and so forth. It gets us ready for, again, fight or flight. And then when the situation or the urgency issue is over with, the parasympathetic brings us down. So this is our body's physiological response to those events that cause emotionality. How do humans differ in body signs? It is difficult to see differences in emotions from tracking heart rate, breathing, and perspiration because it's always going to be heart rate, breathing, perspiration. They're the same type of signs for different types of emotions. So there's a large overlap in the patterns of brain activity across emotions. There are some small differences. For example, fear triggers more amygdala activity than anger does. A general brain pattern, hemispheric differences occur. Positive. Positive approach emotions, joy, love, goal seeking correlate with left frontal lobe activity. Negative withdrawal emotions, disgust, fear, anger, depression, correlate with right hemispheric activity more. Expressed and experienced emotions. See if you can tell what emotions others are feeling, showing an expression about these topics. Detecting emotions in others, gender, emotion, nonverbal behavior, cultural and expressed emotions, using context to read emotions. Are there universally recognized emotions, and do facial expressions affect our feelings? Emotional expressions. Are there universal forms of emotional expression seen on human faces across cultures? Are there differences by individual, cultural, or gender in how emotions are expressed? What is the relationship between emotional expression and inner experience of emotion? What emotion do we see in the faces and body positions? If these emotions are hard to read, is it because it's a different culture from our own, or because it's a performance? So these individuals, by the way, are performing a particular type of dance native to their particular culture. So detecting emotion in others. People read a great deal of emotional content in the eyes, the window to the soul, and they read it in the faces. Introverts are better at detecting emotions. Extroverts have emotions that are easier to read. We are primed to quickly detect negative emotions and even negative emotion words. Those who have been abused or biased toward seeing fearful faces as angry as in the test below. So if you are biased towards seeing fearful faces as angry, then this particular test would make sense to you. These faces morph from fear to anger. So it's going to start off with fearful faces and become more increasingly angry as it goes on. We don't obviously have to perform the little test we see here. So what we're seeing with this particular slide, we're seeing the faces, the images of the face here, change slowly from a face that was designed to be fearful to increasingly angry. And depending on one's personal experiences, okay, and things of that nature, we may be more in tune or more sensitive to detecting these types of faces. Detecting lies and fakes. Polygraphs detecting physiological arousal fail sometimes at correctly identifying people who are lying. Visible signs of lying. Eye blinks decrease and other facial movements change. In which image is Paul Ekman lying? With a fake smile. A real smile uses involuntary muscles around the eyes. So what we see here is that there are ways in which they're trying to determine ways to be able to effectively tell when people are telling lies. Now, obviously, the polygraph, which you've heard of before, is not going to be effectively used all the time to detect a lie. They're taking things like your heart rate and things of that nature to determine stress patterns in the individual to say they are lying. But obviously, as people who have great control over their bodies, they can beat the polygraph test. So they're trying to find other ways to try to determine ways of lying. When it comes to whether or not someone has a fake or real smile, there are muscles around the eyes that you cannot control voluntarily that seem to wrinkle when someone is having a genuine smile as opposed to a fake one. Gender and emotional expression and detection. Women seem to have greater and more complex emotional expression than men. Women also more skilled at detecting emotions in others. However, this is an overgeneralization. People tend to attribute women's emotionality to their dispositions, meaning it's who they are, it is part of their personality, and attributes men's emotion to their circumstances. So if you see two people crying, one male, one female, you will always say, well, the female is crying because, well, that's the way she is. It's part of her personality. The man who may be crying, well, will tend to say it's the circumstances. He just got some really bad news about something, or there's something external to his normal behavior that's indicating why he is crying at the moment. We also see some emotions as being more male, changing our perception of a gender neutral face based on emotion. So here, male or female. If we have this gender neutral face, neither male nor female, having characteristics of both, if we make the face slightly more angry, we'll tend to identify that gender neutral face as being a male. Culture and emotional expression. Are they universally recognized emotions? There seem to be some universally understood facial expressions. People of various cultures agree on the emotional labels for the expressions on the faces on the right. People in other studies did have more accuracy judging emotions from their own culture, however. So, can you identify who's happy, sad, disgusted, afraid? Generally speaking, tend to be really good at this, that we can identify the emotions relatively well. Just to remove curiosity, the first one on the left upper is happy, then to the right, surprise, then to the next line we have sad, then next to him we have fear, and then the bottom left we have anger, and then the one in the bottom right is going to be disgust. Now, emotion detection and context cues. What emotions do you see below? How can you tell what emotion he is feeling? Because the faces are exactly the same, please note that the faces on the images below are exactly the same. Our detection of emotion must be based on context, the situation, the gestures, and the tears. So the same face holding a diaper, okay, we have disgust. We have the same face, we've drew in some tears, he's holding his heart, we have sad. And then we have an upraised fist about ready to hit something, we have anger. So again, the context, the gestures, the other things around this individual will determine what emotion this person is displaying. And finally, we have linking emotions and expressive behaviors, facial feedback. The facial feedback effect. Facial position and muscle changes can alter what or which emotion we feel. In one study, people whose faces were moved into smiling or frowning positions experienced a change in mood. Therefore, if you were forced to have a smile face, you became more happy. A frown face, you became more sad. So what it means is this: when you have that friend of yours that says that you should smile more, you'll feel better, that is an accurate assessment. Fake a relaxed smile and you might feel better. It's not just about faces. In one experiment, extending a middle finger or a thumb while reading led to seeing characters with hostility or with positive attitudes. So what it comes down to, that we see a great deal of things coming back from our behavior that will influence what our emotionality actually is. So the guy at the top, though forced into a smiling position, ended up feeling happier than the guy down here at the bottom.